The following graphic and interesting account of the Great London Epidemic of 1665 is taken from the work of Dr. Nathaniel Hodges, a Fellow of the College of Physicians, resident in the city, and, as his book shows, in active practice among the victims of the disease. Dr. Monk, in his role of the Royal College of Physicians of London, says that he acquired a great name among the citizens of London, that he remained at his post and continued in unremitting attendance on the sick, and that during the latter part of his life he received a regular stipend from the City of London for the performance of his charitable office. Dr. Hodges tells us that
about the close of 1664, 2 or 3 persons died suddenly with symptoms of the plague in one family at Westminster, that some timid neighbours of theirs took fright and removed into the City of London, carrying the taint of pestilence with them, whereby the disease which existed only in a family or two gained strength and spread abroad, and for want of confining the persons first seized with it, the whole city was in a little time irrecoverably infected. In December, a hard frost set in which lasted 3 months, and during that time very few died of the plague. But the disease was not extinguished, for in the middle of the Christmas holidays, a doctor was called to a young man in a fever, who after 2 days had 2 risings about the bigness of a nutmeg, one on each side with a black hue and a circle round them. By these and subsequent symptoms, he judged it to be a case of plague. It did not prove fatal. When the frost broke, the disease gained ground and extended into several parishes, and the authorities issued an order to shut up all the infected houses so as to prevent ingress and egress. To give effect to this order, the houses of the infected were to be marked with a red cross and to carry the inscription, "Lord, have mercy upon us." And a guard was set whose duty it was to hand food and medicine to the sick and to prevent them from going abroad till 40 days after their recovery. In spite of these harsh measures, the plague more and more increased.
Nor will this surprise us if we imagine the efforts that must have been made by the non-infected to escape, and the temptation to servants and nurses to appropriate and remove the property of the dying and dead. Dr. Hodges accuses the nurses of strangling their patients and secretly conveying the taint from the infected to those who were well. And he justifies his accusation of these abandoned miscreants by 2 instances. The one of a nurse who, as she was leaving the house of a family, all dead, loaded with her robberies, fell down dead under her burden in the streets. The other of a
worthy citizen, who being suspected dying by his nurse was beforehand stripped by her, but recovering again he came a second time into the world naked.
In spite of the well-intentioned measures of the authorities, the plague continued through May and June, with more or less severity, sometimes in one place, sometimes in another, till the people, becoming thoroughly frightened, flocked out of town in crowds. But the disease raged with redoubled fury among those that remained. Then the authorities bestirred themselves to the utmost. They instituted a monthly fast, and the king commanded the College of Physicians to write somewhat in English. That might serve as a general directory.
The college not only obeyed the royal commands by inventing a plague water, consisting of a cordial distilled off from a vinous infusion of a score of very harmless roots, leaves and flowers, but also appointed 2 of their number to cooperate with 2 chosen from among the aldermen in attending the infected. Still, in the face of every precaution, the plague continued its work of destruction, especially among the common people, so as to be called the Poor's Plague, and in August and September completely got the mastery, so that 3, 4 or 5,000 died in a week, and once 8,000. In some houses carcasses lay waiting for burial, in others persons in their last agonies. In one room might be heard dying groans, in another the ravings of delirium, and near at hand relations and friends bewailing their loss and their own dismal prospects. Death was the sure midwife to all children, and infants passed immediately from the womb to the grave. Some of the infected ran about staggering like drunken men and fell down dead in the streets, or they lay there comatose and half dead. Some lay vomiting as if they had drunk poison. Others fell dead in the market in the act of buying provisions.
The plague spared no order, age or sex. The divine was taken in the very exercise of his priestly office, and the physician while administering his own antidote. And though the soldiers retreated and encamped out of the city, the contagion followed and vanquished them. Many in their old age, others in their prime, most women and still more children, perished.
And it was not uncommon to see an inheritance pass successively to 3 or 4 heirs in as many days. There were not sextons enough to bury the dead. The bells ceased tolling. The burying places were full, so that the dead were thrown into large pits, dug in waste ground in heaps 30 or 40 together, and those who attended the funerals of their friends one evening were often carried the next to their own long home.
This is written of a time when the worst had not yet happened. It was about the beginning of September that the disease was at its height. Then fires were ordered to be burnt in the streets for 3 days together, but before the time had expired, they were extinguished by heavy rains, which ushered in the most fatal night of all, with its register of more than 4,000 deaths. From this, its culminating point, the plague, by leisurely degrees declined, and before the number infected decreased, its malignity began to relax insomuch that few died, and those chiefly such as were ill-managed. Dr. Hodges distinctly states that the pestilence did not stop for want of subjects, but from the nature of the distemper.
Its decrease was, like its beginning, moderate. Early in November, people grew more healthful, and though the funerals were still frequent, yet many who had made most haste in retiring made the most to return, insomuch that in December they crowded back as thick as they fled.
The houses were again inhabited, the shops reopened, the people went cheerfully to their work. The rooms in which a short time before infected persons had breathed their last were peopled afresh, and many went into their beds before they were even cold or cleansed from the stench of the diseased. They had the courage now to marry again, and even women, before deemed barren, were said to prove prolific, so that, although the contagion had carried off, as some computed, about $100,000 after a few months, their loss was hardly discernible.